My stepson said my last name ruins his image. I took him off every account and shifted everything to his dad. When the collectors came, regret came too late. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now, let's get started. My name's Alex. I'm 43 years old, a civil engineer from Austin, Texas. For most of my adult life, I built things that stood straight and true. Bridges, overpasses, foundations strong enough to bear the weight of 1,000 strangers. I thought that would be my purpose, to build things that didn't collapse. But then I met Melanie, and I thought maybe I could build something different. Family. It was at a charity event downtown, one of those polite fundraisers where people sip wine and talk about community while checking their phones. She stood out not because she tried to, but because she didn't. Her dress was simple, her smile reserved, her laugh quick and honest. We talked about cities and weather, about how Texas builds houses that bake in the sun but never seem to hold warmth inside. She told me she had 2 kids from her previous marriage, Connor, 15, and Maddie, 12. I remember the way her voice softened when she said their names, and I mistook that softness for peace. Their father, Derek, was an occasional presence, the kind of man who existed in photographs more than in person. He lived 2 states away, remarried, and remembered his kids mostly through social media posts. Father's Day selfies, Christmas captions about family time. The truth was simple. He was a ghost who haunted their expectations. He gave them nostalgia, not support. I knew what I was stepping into. I told myself I wasn't there to replace anyone. I just wanted to help, steady the ground beneath them, to give those kids what their father couldn't. Consistency. Melanie and I married a year later. I sold my small 2-bedroom in Austin and moved into her larger house in the Dallas-Fort Worth suburbs. A 2-story with too many empty rooms and a yard I immediately started fixing. I put down roots in someone else's soil and convinced myself it would grow into something shared. I didn't expect gratitude. All I wanted was a bit of respect. But respect, I would learn, was the one thing no one in that house was willing to give. From the start, I became a function, not a person. Driver, handyman, ATM, therapist when it suited them. When the water heater broke, I was the one sweating in the crawlspace. When the family car's tires wore thin, I was the one spending Saturdays at the shop. Connor needed a new guitar. Maddie wanted money for her school trip. Derek's checks came irregularly. A lazy $300 when he remembered. The rest came from me, and I gave freely because giving was my way of belonging. At first, I told myself the coldness in the house was normal, that teenagers were guarded by nature. But it wasn't that. It was something deliberate, like they had drawn lines around me that I wasn't allowed to cross. At dinner, they spoke through Melanie, never to me. Connor would ask, "Mom, can we go to the lake this weekend?" As if I wasn't sitting 3 feet away, as if my presence were decorative. Maddie would hand me her plate silently when she wanted more food, but never say thank you. It was small things at first, subtle enough to excuse. But contempt grows like mold, quietly, until it fills every corner. Melanie noticed, of course. How could she not? But her way of dealing with conflict was silence. "They're just teenagers, Alex," she'd tell me, her tone light but her eyes tired. "Don't take it personally. They'll warm up to you eventually." But eventually never came. Instead, it became routine. Connor came home from school, dropped his backpack, went straight to his room. Maddie scrolled through her phone at the dinner table, barely chewing between texts. And Melanie. She'd watch them with that soft, indulgent expression mothers have when they mistake neglect for independence. Sometimes, I'd sit in the living room while they laughed in the kitchen, and I'd feel like a piece of furniture, necessary but invisible. A guest in my own home. Once, I overheard Maddie tell her friend on the phone, "He's not like a real dad. He's just Alex. Just Alex." The words sat in my chest like a stone. I wanted to believe she didn't mean harm, but innocence doesn't make a wound hurt less. The first real fracture came 6 months after I moved in. Connor had gotten into a fight at school. Nothing serious, just a scuffle in the parking lot. The principal called me because I was the only one who picked up the phone. I left work early, showed up at the school office, and stood beside a boy who wouldn't meet my eyes. When we got home, Melanie thanked me for stepping in, but Connor didn't say a word. Later that night, I heard him whispering through the vent to Maddie. He thinks he's my dad now. What a joke. I sat in the dark of my study, listening, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did. Every word chipped away at something I didn't know was fragile. Holidays were the hardest. I'd spend hours hanging lights, grilling food, wrapping gifts, doing everything I could to make it feel like family. And yet, every Christmas morning, when Derek's call came, everything I'd done vanished in seconds. Maddie would beam, Connor's whole mood would change. He'd walk around the house, phone to ear, saying, "Yeah, Dad, we're good. Yeah, Mom's happy. Yeah, Alex is here too," in that flat tone that made my name sound like a nuisance. Melanie would smile, pretending not to notice how my chest tightened each time. "At least he called," she'd whisper, as if that was enough. But the truth is, I didn't hate Derek. I envied him. He got all the love, none of the labor. All the memory, none of the maintenance. He was the ghost they worshipped, and I was the man cleaning up after him. I kept working, both at my job and in that house. I rebuilt the deck, repainted Maddie's room, installed shelves in Connor's garage workspace when he decided he might take up woodworking. He never did. But I kept building because that's what I knew how to do. To fix, to create, to make things stable. I thought if I built enough, if I gave enough, maybe they'd finally see me as something more than the man who paid the bills. But families aren't bridges. They don't hold just because you measure and plan them right. The day I realized that was quiet, unremarkable. It was a Sunday morning. Melanie and I were having coffee on the porch, the air heavy with early Texas heat. She looked tired, her hair tied back, a softness in her face that used to calm me. Maddie was inside, blasting music. Connor had just left to meet friends. I asked her if she ever thought the kids would come around, if she thought maybe we'd ever feel like a real family. She took a long sip, stared into her mug, and said, "They're good kids, Alex. They just miss their father. You can't expect them to love you the same way." The words were meant kindly, but they gutted me, because that was the moment I understood. She didn't see me as their father either. Not really. I was the man who filled the gaps, the wallet that made normal life possible, the one holding the seams together while she looked backward, remembering someone who wasn't there. After that, I stopped asking for connection. I just did my part, paid the bills, fixed the house, drove them to their practices, their recitals, their games. I became a rhythm, a background hum, a necessary silence. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the window while washing dishes, the outline of a man who had built a home he didn't belong to, and I'd wonder, how does a man lose himself so quietly that no one even notices he's gone? I used to think family was something you built through effort, like a structure, stronger with every nail, every beam, every long night of work. But with Melanie and her kids, I learned the truth. Some families aren't built. They're guarded. They let you close enough to serve, never close enough to stay. By the end of that first year, the house looked perfect. New flooring, polished railings, trimmed hedges. But something underneath was already cracking. The laughter never included me. The dinners felt rehearsed. The love, conditional. And though no one said it aloud, the air in that house carried a message as clear as if it were carved into the walls. "You're useful, Alex, but you're not one of us." The day everything cracked began like any other. Quiet, domestic, predictable. The kind of day where silence feels normal, not heavy. I came home late from work, still wearing my reflective vest, dust clinging to my jeans. The smell of dinner lingered in the air, but the plates were already in the sink. I could hear voices from upstairs. Connor's room, music low, laughter leaking through the vent. I paused halfway up the stairs when I caught a phrase that froze me mid-step. "Yeah, Alex is okay, but having his last name? Total embarrassment. He's so old school." The words came sharp and easy, casual, as if they meant nothing. His friend laughed, that kind of teenage snicker that cuts deep because it's thoughtless. Then Connor added, louder, like he wanted to be heard, "If it weren't for him, Mom would have bought a new car by now instead of paying off his mortgage. My throat went dry. Mortgage. My mortgage. The house I sold, the money I poured into theirs. All of it recast as an inconvenience to them. I didn't move, didn't barge in. Just stood there, listening to the rhythm of their laughter. The casual cruelty that doesn't come from malice but from comfort. They were comfortable enough to mock me, to make me the punchline of their home. When I finally went downstairs, the house felt colder. I opened the fridge, took out a beer, and sat at the table staring at nothing. Every nail I'd driven into that house, every bill I'd paid, every late night of overtime so Connor could have a car, a guitar, a chance, reduced to a joke about how I'd held their mother back. I didn't confront him that night, didn't mention what I'd heard. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up a spreadsheet, and began to trace my generosity. I listed it all: tuition payments, insurance premiums, allowances, concert tickets, phone bills, car installments, gas money, new shoes, repairs, every unthanked gesture. By the time I finished, the total stared back at me like a confession. Nearly $18,000 a year. $18,000 for silence, contempt, and the privilege of being unwanted. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. There are moments in a man's life when anger doesn't explode. It settles, like sediment in water, making everything suddenly clear. That night, clarity arrived. I wasn't angry at Connor. Not really. He was just a mirror, reflecting what this house had quietly believed for years. That I was the stand-in, the second draft of a man they'd never stopped missing. The next morning, I made my coffee as usual. Melanie came downstairs, hair wrapped in a towel, still half asleep. I told her calmly, "I'm cutting expenses." She frowned, rubbing her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean no more extras. The kids are old enough to handle their own costs." She hesitated, watching me over the rim of her mug. "If this is about money, Alex, we can." "It's not about money," I said. "It's about principle." She didn't ask more. She never wanted to. Conflict wasn't her language. 2 days later, I followed through. I called the insurance company and removed Connor from my plan. I canceled the joint card he used for gas and groceries. I transferred the car payments to Derek's account. His name was still listed as cosigner. Every decision neat, quiet, deliberate. The next evening, Connor stormed into my office without knocking. His face was pale, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and panic. "You can't just erase me like that," he shouted. I looked up from my desk, pen still in hand. "I didn't erase you, Connor. I just stopped sponsoring you." He blinked. "Sponsoring me? What the hell does that mean?" "It means you said my name was an embarrassment. So I assumed you'd prefer to live under your father's name, financially included." For a moment, he just stood there, mouth open, as if the logic had stunned him. Then his voice cracked. "You can't just do that. You're supposed to." I cut him off. "Supposed to what? Pay for a son who isn't mine? You made your choice, Connor. Now I'm making mine." He turned red, fists clenched. "You're crazy. You're punishing me for nothing." I leaned back in my chair, calm as stone. "No. I'm teaching you what every man learns eventually. Words cost. And now, so does disrespect." He left, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell from the wall. The sound didn't startle me. It felt like punctuation, the last loud thing before silence takes over. That night, the house was tense. Melanie sensed it immediately. Over dinner, she tried to keep the conversation light, but Connor barely spoke, and Maddie watched me with wide, uncertain eyes. When Melanie asked what had happened, Connor snapped, "Ask your husband." Her fork froze midair. "Connor, don't talk like that." But he just glared at me. "He's not my dad. He doesn't get to control my life." The words hung in the air like smoke. I saw the flash of guilt in Melanie's eyes, the way she wanted to scold him but didn't. Instead, she turned to me and said softly, "He's upset, Alex. Let's just give him time." I nodded, though the decision had already been made. Time wasn't going to fix what silence had built. The next week unfolded like slow collapse. Connor's phone was disconnected first. Then came the letter from the bank, notice of delinquency for the car. I had warned him, but I doubt he believed me. When the repossession notice arrived, it went straight to Derek. His name, his debt, his problem. By Friday, Melanie's phone rang twice an hour. Collectors, banks, all wanting payment. She tried to keep her composure, answering politely, insisting there must be a mistake. But there wasn't. When she finally turned to me, tears in her eyes, I handed her the documents. "Here's the updated paperwork," I said. "Everything's under Derek's name now. They'll call him next." She stared at the papers, her voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, how could you do this?" "Easily," I said. "It was never really my responsibility, remember? That's what you both kept saying." Her expression shifted, shock, then anger. "You're being heartless. He's just a kid." I shook my head. "No, Melanie. He's not a kid. He's a young man who thinks he's above consequence. And you—" I stopped, lowering my voice. "You taught him that, by never holding him accountable, by standing silent while he disrespected me." She looked away, jaw trembling. "You're punishing everyone for one stupid comment." "One comment." I laughed quietly. "You think this started yesterday? It's been years, Melanie. Years of being treated like I'm temporary. I'm done financing contempt." The fight stretched into days. Words turned sharp, hours turned long. We spoke less, slept apart. I stopped cooking dinner, stopped waiting for her to sit beside me. The house became a quiet battlefield. Every closed door another declaration of war. A month later, she packed a suitcase. "I can't live like this," she said. Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. "I know," I replied. She didn't ask me to stop her. She took Maddie, left Connor with Derek, and drove away without looking back. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. "Connor." I didn't answer. There's a kind of peace that only comes after you stop paying for your own humiliation. It's not joy, not even relief. It's emptiness that finally feels earned. I sat in the quiet house that night, the air thick with the smell of dust and absence, and realized that everything I had tried to build, every sacrifice, every second chance, had been bought with borrowed respect. And respect, I learned, is the one debt that can't be repaid with money. The first week after Melanie left, the house felt hollow, like a stage after the audience had gone home. Every room echoed differently. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It had shape, weight, edges. I'd come home from work, drop my keys on the counter, and listen to the sound as they landed. That single metallic click reminded me there was no one left to hear it. I told myself this was clarity, that I'd done the right thing, that sometimes peace looks like absence. But peace, when you've spent years trying to buy it, feels too much like punishment at first. You keep expecting noise, the argument, the door slam, the forced laughter that fills a house so it doesn't collapse under its own tension. When it doesn't come, you realize how much of your life was built around enduring sound you hated just to avoid silence you feared. Connor was gone by then, living with Derek, or at least trying to. The last message I received from Melanie mentioned he'd moved into his father's small apartment outside Houston. "He'll be okay," she wrote. "This might be good for them." I didn't reply. But the world doesn't stay quiet just because you stop talking. One by one, the consequences started knocking. A week after she left, I came home to a voicemail from the bank. Connor's car, the one I'd transferred under Derek's responsibility, was in repossession status. Payments had stopped immediately after I withdrew. The co-signer, Derek himself, hadn't picked up their calls. They were reaching out to verify the paperwork. I told them it was legitimate and they should contact the listed debtor. They thanked me and hung up. That night, I sat on the porch with a drink and imagined Derek's face when the first collector called him. Maybe he'd stammer. Maybe he'd curse. Maybe, for once in his life, he'd understand what it felt like to be the man everyone depended on but no one respected. For the first time in years, I didn't envy him, pitied him, because now the same system that had drained me was finally coming for him. Within days, more calls followed. Credit notices, overdue balances, confusion from offices that had grown used to my voice, my reliability. They wanted me back in the loop. They wanted the old arrangement, the quiet man who paid without complaint. But that man was gone. Melanie called on the third day. Her tone was sharp, breathless. The voice of someone who'd been holding her anger too long. "What the hell did you do, Alex?" I stayed calm. "I did what you always told me to do. I stopped taking it personally." "This isn't funny," she snapped. "Collectors are calling me. They're threatening to sue. Connor's panicking. Derek's furious." "Good," I said. "Let them be furious. I've lived there long enough." She went quiet for a moment. I could almost hear the memory of our old arguments. The same pauses, the same shallow breaths before she tried to guilt me back into silence. "You've destroyed their trust," she whispered. "No," I said. "They destroyed it years ago. I just stopped pretending it could be rebuilt." She hung up without saying goodbye. A few days later, a letter came from the bank addressed to me, though it wasn't meant for me. It was a final notice to Derek, his account in default, vehicle to be repossessed, co-signed obligations due. The envelope had been forwarded from the old house, the one I'd once called home. I stared at it for a while before setting it aside. There was a cruel symmetry to it all. The bills I used to shoulder now resting on the man whose name they carried. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like exposure. Like I'd peeled away the illusion we'd all been living under and found nothing underneath. Melanie called again a week later, her voice trembling this time, anger stripped away. "He's gone," she said. "Derek." He stopped answering. He blocked Connor's number. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. "Then maybe your son will finally learn who actually carried him all these years." "That's not fair," she said, her voice breaking. "Fair?" I repeated. "You're talking about fairness now?" She cried quietly, the way she used to when we first argued about the kids. I listened, but something in me had gone still. Once her tears had power. They pulled me back, made me compromise. Not this time. I had nothing left to give her but silence. By the end of the month, the collapse was complete. Connor's phone was disconnected. His car was gone. The college he'd been planning to attend had withdrawn his registration due to unpaid fees. The life that had always seemed guaranteed, built on invisible scaffolding I maintained, was gone piece by piece. He was living in Derek's cramped apartment, trying to find a job. Melanie was staying with her mother, back in the same small town she swore she'd never return to. And me, I was free in the loneliest sense of the word. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if I'd gone too far, whether there was a kinder way to teach the same lesson. But then I'd remember that kindness in that family had always been a transaction. Every gentle act, every compromise, was just another down payment on respect that never arrived. One night, I received a text from an unknown number. It was short, almost hesitant. "Hey, it's Connor. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need help, just for a bit." I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct I had, the part of me that had spent years patching holes, fixing problems, making life easier, wanted to answer. But I didn't. Not out of pride, but because I finally understood the difference between helping and enabling. So I put the phone face down on the table and let the message fade into the dark. That night, I slept without dreams. 2 days later, another text came. This one from Melanie. "He's working part-time now, at a warehouse. He's angry, but he'll be okay. I hope you're happy." I didn't answer that either. Happiness wasn't the goal. Sanity was. A month passed. The calls stopped. The debts found their rightful owners. My name was finally untangled from theirs. Every document, every signature, every invisible tether that had once tied me to their comfort. It was exhausting to unwind it all. But when it was done, I felt lighter, as if I'd stepped out of a house that had been slowly flooding for years. Then, one quiet evening, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address, just my name in careful, uneven script. I knew it was Connor's before I opened it. I hesitated, almost didn't want to, but curiosity still had its hold. It was short, a single page. I finally understand what your last name was worth. I'm sorry it took me this long. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. The handwriting was shaky but clear. No excuses, no long explanations, just that single admission. It should have meant something, it should have felt like closure. But it didn't, because the apology wasn't about me. It was about him, his understanding, his guilt, his attempt to feel clean again. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer of my desk. Then I closed it. I didn't burn it, didn't throw it away. I just let it exist, sealed between wood and silence. That's the truth about endings, they're never loud. They don't come with final words or reconciliations. They arrive quietly when you stop checking your phone, when you stop rehearsing what you'll say if they ever apologize. When the part of you that used to ache finally feels nothing at all. I still see Melanie sometimes, from a distance. Grocery store aisles, parking lots, the small coincidences of living in the same state. She always looks away first. Maybe out of shame, maybe out of habit. I don't blame her. We both built something that looked like family but wasn't. We both believed love could survive on the back of obligation. But love without respect isn't love. It's debt. And eventually every debt gets called in. So I go home to a quieter house, smaller but mine. I cook for one, sleep alone, and wake without resentment. It isn't joy, but it's honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the only thing left when the illusions fall away. Half a year has passed since the house emptied. Time moves differently now. Slower, heavier, quieter. I measure my days not by noise but by stillness. I wake to the creak of wood expanding in the morning sun, the sigh of the coffee machine, the hum of an old ceiling fan turning above an empty living room. These sounds have become my company, honest and unpretending. At first, I thought I'd go insane in the silence. For years I'd lived inside a constant storm of voices, slamming doors, teenage laughter sharp as knives. Melanie's calm explanations that sounded more like apologies for other people's behavior. The chaos was unbearable, but it was life. It filled the air. When it was gone, I didn't know what to do with the quiet that replaced it. Pressed against my chest like guilt. But then the silence started changing. It stopped accusing me. It started teaching me. I learned the shape of my own presence. I realized how much space I had given away, how much of myself I'd bent to fit the narrow corridors of someone else's comfort. I used to think patience was virtue. Now I understand patience can be cowardice when you let people walk over you in its name. I've kept the same house, the big one. I thought about selling it, downsizing, moving closer to the city, but I couldn't. It wasn't nostalgia that kept me here. It was reclamation. Every corner of this place had once been a reminder of my invisibility. Now I wanted to repaint those memories, one room at a time, until the walls stopped echoing with their contempt. The first thing I did was strip the living room bare. Furniture, rugs, pictures, everything. I stood in the emptiness and listened to the echo of my footsteps. It felt like exorcism. Then I repainted the walls a colder white. Not warm beige, not family home tan. White, clean and sharp, like a blank page. I replaced the sofa, changed the curtains, threw out the dining table where years of unspoken tension had sat across from me. I left the space open. Empty space doesn't mock you. It just waits. The photographs were the hardest. Frames of smiling faces, vacations that felt forced even then. Holidays where I stood at the edge of the shot, cropped halfway out. For weeks I couldn't decide what to do with them. Throwing them away felt vindictive. Keeping them felt dishonest. In the end, I boxed them all and stored them in the attic, not out of sentiment but because I wanted proof. Proof that I had lived that life. Proof that I survived it. My routine now is simple. Work, cook, sleep, read, walk, fix things I once ignored. On weekends I drive out to the lake, the same one we used to visit as a family. I park near the shore, sit on the hood of my truck, and watch the water shift with the wind. The silence out there isn't empty. It's alive. Birds cutting through the reflection, wind brushing the reeds, the soft pulse of the waves against rock. I used to take those drives to escape them. Now I go to find myself. Sometimes at the lake I think about Connor and Maddie. Not with anger anymore, with distance, like remembering characters from a story I once believed in. I wonder how they're doing, if they've learned anything from the collapse, if they still tell themselves the same convenient lies about who was to blame. Maybe they hate me. Maybe they understand. It doesn't matter. Understanding is their burden now, not mine. A few weeks ago, I received another letter, postmarked from Houston. Connor again. I almost didn't open it. Curiosity won. It was short, like the first one, written in the same uneven hand. I'm working now. Warehouse job. Not much, but steady. I get it now, what you tried to do. I wish I'd seen it sooner. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it again. Connor. I read it once, folded it carefully, and set it beside the first. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty but out of peace. Some apologies belong to the person who gives them, not the one who receives them. His words weren't for me. They were for the man he might become. Melanie wrote 2 months before that. A longer letter. Regret tangled with excuses. Nostalgia woven into justification. She said she'd moved back to Texas, was living with her mother, working part-time, trying to rebuild. She ended with a line that lingered longer than it should have. You were a good man, Alex. I just wish I'd realized it before everything fell apart. I didn't respond to her either. Maybe that's cruel. But answering her would mean reopening a door that took years to close. Love doesn't die quickly. It decays slowly, like wood left in the rain. You wake up one day and realize it isn't there anymore, only the memory of its shape. Sometimes I catch myself missing the smallest things, not the people but the rituals. Sunday breakfasts, the sound of footsteps upstairs, the faint music from Maddie's room, muffled through walls. I miss the illusion of belonging more than the reality. That's the trick grief plays. It makes you nostalgic for lies that hurt you, but even nostalgia has softened. Now, when I think about them, there's no bitterness left. Just a quiet acknowledgement that I gave everything I had, and it wasn't enough, not because it lacked value, but because they didn't know how to receive it. I don't regret the years I spent trying. I regret not stopping sooner. There's a kind of self-respect that only grows in the ruins of what you refuse to abandon. The other day, a neighbor stopped me while I was repainting the porch. She said, "It must be lonely in that big house." I smiled and said, "It's honest." She didn't understand, but I didn't expect her to. Most people think peace looks like laughter, full tables, noise. For me, peace is absence. Absence of pretending, of tension, of that quiet fear that you'll never be enough for people who keep measuring you against a ghost. When I walk through the house now, I sometimes talk out loud. Not to anyone, just to the space itself. To remind it that I exist here, that this silence belongs to me. There's a strength in solitude once you stop mistaking it for loss. I've started saving again. Not for anyone else, for myself. Vacations, hobbies, maybe a boat for the lake one day. Money feels different now. It doesn't vanish into other people's comfort. It stays, accumulates, reflects back the value of restraint. Every dollar I keep feels like a small act of rebellion against the years I spent buying love that never came. People ask if I'd ever marry again. I don't say no. I just say, not while I'm still learning to live with myself. Because that's what this is, recovery, not loneliness. Sobriety, the withdrawal from a life built on emotional dependency. The quiet that follows chaos is not emptiness. It's clarity returning to a man who's finally stopped lying to himself. I still think about respect, how it became the currency of my downfall. For years, I tried to earn it by giving. Now I know respect isn't earned through sacrifice. It's earned through boundaries, through the refusal to fund your own erasure. Some nights, when the house feels too big, I sit outside with a drink and watch the neighborhood lights go out one by one. There's a strange comfort in knowing other families are still awake, still arguing, still pretending, still holding themselves together with debt and denial. I've been there. I know the cost. By midnight, the world goes still. The cicadas buzz, the air cools, and the reflection of the moon settles across the front lawn. I breathe deeply, without guilt. I'm not happy, not really. Happiness is too bright a word for what I feel. But I'm clear, clean, unentangled. For the first time, my life fits inside my own hands. I don't save anyone anymore. Not with money, not with patience, not with forgiveness. Because I learned that respect can't be purchased with bills or bargains. It can only be given freely, and only to those who've earned it. That lesson cost me everything I thought I loved. But it gave me something rarer, freedom. And when I sit here, watching the dawn bleed slowly across the sky, I ask myself, and maybe you too, the only question that still matters: was I wrong to stop saving them? Or was walking away the first honest thing I ever did?